Well, I admire you a lot, because if I was getting ready for exams, the last place I'd be is here. I'd come for the food and then I would have left. So the fact that you stay, if you've smiled saying we thought about it, I caught you. But I'm glad you're here, and we're going to just talk about religious life. And there are many people in my life, many friends. I grew up in Atlanta. None of my close friends are Catholic. None of them really understood what Catholicism was. None of them understood what church or priesthood was. Some people in my family aren't so sure what it is. And so, they'll still say to me, "What do you do? What do you do? We don't get it. What's that religious life thing?" So when Dawn said to me, "What would you talk about it?" I said, "Sure." And she said, what should we call it? And I said, "Get a life," because my family still says get a life. And so what I'd like to do is in 3 stages. I'd like to kind of give, a really quick, how did it come about? Then I'd like to define just a few terms. And then I'd like to talk about why I think people do this. In no way am I suggesting anybody should do this. And you'll see why at the end. Okay, how did it all come about? How did it all come about? Well, religious life existed long before Jesus. Just about every culture, Greek, Roman, Egyptian, they've had religious life. People coming together to live religious values together in community and to be contrary to the normal culture. Somehow to stand apart from it and say, we have something special, we're going to live together, we're going to try to do this thing right, and we want to be countercultural. And so long before Jesus ever got on the face of the earth, we've had religious life. So this is nothing new. So what happens? Where does Christian religious life come from? Well, Jesus comes and he does what he does best. He talks about God and he talks about love and he gets people inspired and people say, "We want to be with you." And basically they're Jewish people and they start to follow him, and then he dies and he rises from the dead and people are saying, "This is the most amazing thing in the world. He's telling us things we've never heard before. We're going to keep following him." Until all of a sudden, the Roman leaders of the day, they don't think it's so good. They're saying these people that are going around and talking about Jesus and they're doing all these things, they're bothering us, they're a pain in our butt. We got to get rid of them. So they come up with this great idea. They start killing them. Yeah. Throwing them to lions. Well, then, people who really wanted to show they love Jesus, I'm not quite sure about the mental stability of these people, but they said, "Well, great, we'll be Christian and we'll be killed. This is great. This is how we're going to show them that we love Jesus." Now, that works when you're telling your girlfriend at about 2 in the morning, "I'd die for you." But nobody really believes it. But these Christians, they did. They said, "We'll show them that we really believe in this Jesus. We really believe in this message, and we'll die for him." And so they were radical Christians. They were radical Christians. They took that gospel message and they went out and they lived it, and they in fact died. Well, around 313 or so, there's a real theologian in the room, so he'll probably prove me wrong. So I'm not going to look at him if he's laughing. But about 313 or so, Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. And once it became the official religion of the Roman Empire, nobody was dying anymore. It was against the law to kill Christians, and it became popular. Well, the people who wanted to be radical Christians, the people who wanted to live the life of Jesus to the extreme, they got bummed out. I can't die anymore. What am I going to do? So they thought it over, they scratched their heads, they weren't sure what they were going to do, so they had this idea: we'll go out into the desert and we'll give up everything, and we won't be in relationships, and we'll live alone, and we'll live a really hard life, and we'll sort of be like a martyr, but they won't really kill us. We'll look like we're killing ourselves. Sound good so far? Crazy! No, but that's how it started. That's how it started. Well, in the West, as more and more people started to go out alone, live life by themselves, not be in relationships, not fall in love, be simple, giving things up, they started to form communities around it. People started to say, "Well, we should be alone, but living out in the desert is really a tough thing, so let's get together in groups, and we'll live in groups, but we'll live simply. We won't get married. We'll try to listen to what the gospel has to say." They started to live their life radical Christianity, not dying, but away from normal life, away from the cities, away from what everybody else was doing, and they said, we're not going to get married, we're not going to have stuff, we're going to live simply, and we're going to just try to be how we understand Jesus to be. And folks, that's really how religious life got started. And then from that, there were two developments of religious life. There were these people that still wanted to be martyrs, but nobody was around to kill them, so they were going to, quote unquote, spiritually kill themselves. They were going to eat very little. They weren't going to have any pleasure. They were going to mortify themselves. And they were going to say, see how much we love Jesus, that we don't need anything that the world has to offer. We just love Jesus and we can live on that alone. And that sort of formed a monastery of mortification, ascetical, where they lived life unbelievably hard and difficult. Well, after a while, some people said, looks good, but don't want to do that. But I like this idea of living in community. I like this idea of giving myself over to Jesus. So we'll do, instead of like starving ourselves, and instead of like living a really hard life, we'll pray extra hard. Everybody that has to go to work and everybody that has to raise a family, well, we'll live life simply and by ourselves, and we'll just pray a lot. And we'll try to be more holy. Well, sooner or later, people started to come out and ask those people questions about what life was about, why they were doing that, were they happy, and when they went out there, they started to feed them, they started to share their food, and towns started to grow up around them. And so some of these groups and people that formed these monasteries that lived to be holy then started to take care of the people that came out. So they started to teach them and feed them and care for them. And then finally, a group of men and women, but mostly men at first, got together and said, we don't want to live in one place, and we don't want to be just a kind of like a holy group. We want to go out in the world, and we want to kind of do what Jesus did. We want to try to help feed people. We want to help change things. We want to help heal people. We want to tell them about Jesus. We want to encourage them to follow us. And so a new form of religious life, like Jesuits, apostolic, they go out in the world, was formed. And honest to God, you can read, just so I didn't look like a total moron, the last few days, I read these things, because I don't have a life. I'm a religious. And so I read these things just to make sure that what I told you was true about religious life. That's how it got started. So now I want to talk to you about a few terms, and then get to what really Don was talking about. Why would somebody do it? Terms. Most people, when they around Boston College, when they see me, they call me Father Jack. And when you call me Father Jack, you're saying you're a priest. And everybody thinks it's a big deal. I'm a priest. That's the least important part of my life. Being a priest is the least important part of my life. I am a religious. And a religious is something different than a priest. There was a time where there were two groups of people. There were clerics, people who were ordained. Bishops laid hands on people, said, you have the authority to minister in the name of the church. And then there were people like your moms and your dads, my moms and dad, who fell in love, got married, had children. They raised family, stayed single. But they were lay people and clerics. And then there was these people that came around, these religious orders. And they were lay people because they weren't ordained, but they lived together, they lived simply. They were different than priests. They were different than priests, and they were different than lay people. And now that's called religious life. And here's the definition of religious life. A religious is a person who lives in community under some sort of rule or norm that binds them together, and they take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. I'm a religious. I was a religious for 15 years. I was a religious for 15 years. I came, I lived with the Jesuits, I took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. 15 years before I was ordained. Being a priest is like icing on the cake for my religious life. If somebody says to me, what do you do? First of all, I say I'm a therapist, I'm a psychologist, because that's my job. Being a religious is my life. When somebody says to Tim, what do you do? He doesn't say, my job is I'm a husband. He says, no, I work at Boston College. And somebody says, Tim, what's your life? He says, I'm married and I got these great kids. Well, when somebody says to me, what's your job? I say, well, I'm a campus minister. I'm a psychologist. Oh, really? You're married? No, I'm a religious. And then they kind of look at you like, huh? Religious takes vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. The guys across the street, what street? That street, St. John's Seminary. They want to be priests. They do not want to be religious. They do not take vows of poverty. They do not take vows of chastity. They do not take vows of obedience. Most likely, the parish priest in your parish is a diocesan priest. He can make as much money as he wants. He can't get married, so he takes a promise to his bishop to remain celibate. And all celibate means is, I'm not going to get married. Just means I'm not going to get married. And he takes a promise to be obedient to his bishop for assignments, but he doesn't take a vow of obedience. The guys across the street, they're going to live in a church, in a rectory, all their lives. They can be as rich as they want to be. They don't take a vow of poverty. They don't take a vow of chastity. We're going to talk about that in a second. And they don't take a vow of obedience. They just say, I'm never going to get married, and I'll do the sacraments. I'll do church stuff for God's people. That's the diocesan priesthood. Religious are men and women. Some are ordained like I am. Some aren't ordained. They live together in community under a certain way of life. I'm a Jesuit. They're Franciscans. They're Benedictines. They're Dominicans. And they all have a different way of seeing the world. Jesuits have a different way of seeing the world. Dominicans have a different way of seeing the world. Franciscans have a different way of seeing the world. And every one of us take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Why? Why do we take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience? Well, here's why. They're called evangelical counsels because they're supposedly coming right from the Bible. Jesus said, you want to come and follow me? Sell everything. Leave everything behind and come follow me. So the vow of poverty is, we'll give up everything and we'll go follow you. And Jesus said there will be some people that will be eunuchs for the kingdom of God. That they won't just say, I'm not going to get married, but they're not going to fill up their lives with anything that distracts them from keeping their eyes on God. And so I take a vow of chastity. Chastity means a whole lot more than I just can't get married. It means I'm not supposed to have any relationship in my life with a thing or a person that demands of me more than God and God's people. When you people call me at 3 in the morning, if I'm going to be a good religious, I should say, I'm here for you. Not that I like my bed. I can break my vow of chastity just by saying, I like my bread too much. I can break my vow of chastity by making my best friend number one in my life. Chastity, taking a vow of chastity, is saying, I will do nothing to fill that spot for God. And obedience? Obedience is Jesus saying, unless you do the will of my Father. Obedience is saying, I will put my own will aside and I'll do the best of my ability to do what I think God wants me to do. Now I'm going to talk about those 3 vows a little bit more, and then I'm going to talk about why somebody becomes a religious. There are many different ways of looking at those vows. Trappists and Dominicans and other orders, they sometimes think the vows make them holy. Like if I don't get married, there was this idea that somehow sex wasn't so good. That's not true. Don't let any... And I'm not joking about this. Not only the teaching of the church, but God Almighty doesn't make anything that's bad. And God Almighty didn't make us sexual and then say, oops, that's bad. No. That'd be a sick, warped God. The fact that we're sexual, the fact that we like sex, the fact that we want to procreate, the fact that we want to cuddle, the fact that we want to experience love, that's a good thing. That comes from God, and you should praise God for it, and you should celebrate it. This weird, whacked out stuff that sex is bad and ooh, dirty and that, yeah. You'll be coming and see me as a psychologist soon if you think that. Sex is good. But some people thought sex was so powerful and they weren't so sure about it, and so if they didn't have sex, they'd be holy. Jesuits say, no, that's not why we do it. And some people thought, if I don't have stuff, that somehow I'll be holy. Jesuits say, no, that's not why we do it. And some people said obedience. I'll just let people tell me what to do no matter what, and I'll be holy. And Jesuits don't do it for that reason. Here's why I do my vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Great psychologist Carl Jung once said this: all relationships are formed out of your weakness. This is the power of the cross, folks. This is what makes the cross so great. All relationships are formed out of weakness. If you're strong, if you're self-sufficient, you don't need anybody. You don't need anybody. And if you don't need anybody, you don't have to reach out to anybody. You don't have to get into a relationship with anybody. You don't have to fall in love. And to be made in the image of likeness of God, what do you think that means? It doesn't mean God has two eyes, a nose, and a mouth. Some of you heard this joke before, because if that's what it's meant to be, then I hope to hell when I get to heaven, God comes up looking like Meg Ryan for me. And then all these years of celibacy, it's going to make sense. But that's not what being made in the image and likeness of God is. Being made in the image and likeness of God is one God, three persons, so much in love with each other, they form perfect community, they become one. To be made in the image and likeness of God is we are called to be in community with one another, and we're called to fall in love with one another. What's the greatest commandment of all? To love God above all things, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And so Carl Jung understood why Jesus, I think, was on that cross. God was so perfect, He didn't need us anymore. We pulled away from Him. And we were afraid to go back to Him, because what does God need? Nothing. So God broke Himself open, became human. He understood what it was like to have diarrhea. He understood what it was like to be a baby and not be able to feed himself. He understood what it was like to be cold. He understood what it was like to be rejected. He understood what it was like to be hated so much they nailed Him to a tree, and He could look down and say, I'm thirsty, I need you. And it was God's way of saying, welcome back into my very heart. Come back into my relationship with me. And so Carl Jung, the beautiful psychologist, psychiatrist that he is, says all relationships are formed out of need and brokenness. It's because Jack Butler, who is a dyslexic, needs somebody to read my stuff so they can say, you can't spell. And I'll say, yes. And they'll help me. It's the fact that we're lonely, that we don't have so much pride. We can pick up the phone and call a friend and say, I'm lonely. Can you just come over tonight? And so Jesuits take vows for two reasons. Our vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience are done for two reasons. And these are the two reasons. First of all, to make us apostolic, to make us available to go in the world. I don't have any stuff. I don't have an iPod. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I don't want an iPod. I wouldn't be able to figure it out. I never had a cell phone ever in my life until I came here. And then they put me on call, and every time somebody gets in trouble, they call me, and you know what? I'd give it away in a second. I can't stand this freaking thing. They ring all the time. There's 2 messages on it already. It's silent. I hate it. I take a vow of poverty so I don't have stuff. So when my provincial says to me, like he almost did last year, go to Fairfield, I get in the car, I put it in drive. I don't own a car. I get in a car that's going to have to come back to Boston College, and I drive down to Fairfield. And I say, I'm here, let's go to work. When I leave here, my vow of poverty, I'm not poor. I'm a white male with 7 academic degrees. I cannot be poor. A white male with 7 academic degrees. I got tons of power. I can't be poor like the people in Calcutta. I can't be poor like the people in the street. I can't be poor like some minorities. I can't be poor like some women. My poverty is, I say I'm not going to clutter my life with stuff. And so when I got to go somewhere, I just get in the car and I go. I don't got to call a mover. I don't even need a whole lot of boxes. I got a lot of books, but it's time to get rid of them. My vow of chastity, it's not because I don't want to be married. You'll find out in a second, I really want to be married. I really want to have little rugrats. My vow of chastity is so at 3 in the morning when you call me, I'm not having fun with my wife. and saying, "No, sorry, gotta go." Bing. Hello, dear. No. 3 in the morning when you call me, I look at my pillow and say, "Shit, you're nothing. I'll go." My vow of chastity says I'm available to God and God's people, and you are the people that I'm called to be in relationship with, live, and work with, and for. And my vow of obedience is saying this, that I will put what I understand God's needs first. Everything I do, I try to pray to God and say, "Is this what I'm supposed to do?" And if there's enough time, I'll tell you an interesting story about something God said to me once that I hated. And I'm still trying to do it today. And I give my will over to a provincial. He's like my bishop. In fact, he is my bishop. We're not responsible to the guy across the street. He lets us work here. And if I screw up, he can kick me out of the area. But my bishop, the guy I'm responsible, is called a provincial. His name's Tom Regan. And he says to me, "Jack, you gave me the authority. You turned over your will so that I can send you to take care of God's people. I want you to go somewhere. Go." Since I've been a Jesuit, they sent me to Amman, Jordan, right after the Gulf War. They've sent me to Jamaica and El Salvador. I've lived in New York. I've lived in Maryland. I've lived in Cambridge, the worst place ever. And I've lived in Jamaica Plain, and I've lived here. We take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience not to make us holy, but to make us available to do God's work for you. We also take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience because I believe my greatest vow of poverty is not that I don't have stuff, but that I don't have a partner or a wife, and that I don't have children. That's the thing that makes me the poorest of all. And so I need you. I had one brother who was killed, who was my twin brother. I'm it. The Butler family and the Gilday family, they could never figure out the sex thing. We have very few people in my family. And so God said to me, "Come and be family with my children." But my vow of poverty is I don't have one person that I call sort of my own. And my vow of poverty is I don't hold a little face that kind of looks like me, as scary as that might sound, and say, "This is my future." I got no future except you guys making it. When you guys go here and I say to you, "I'll go and light the world on fire," I mean that, folks, because you're my future. Because you're God's future. My vow of poverty leads me into my vow of chastity, which leads me in my vow of obedience. I'm a broken man and I need you people. And Jesuits realize we're sinful. That's what Ignatius said. Stand at the foot of the cross and say, "I'm a sinful man under the banner of the cross. I'm broken. And I need you people to live a life of poverty, chastity, and obedience." That's why religious do what they do. Now, last thing, because I promised Donna I'd do this in time, and I always am faithful to my promise, sort of. Why do it? Why do it? Why live a life of poverty? Why live a life of chastity? Why live obedience? Why do it? Because it doesn't really sound all that good even when I'm saying it to you. You fall in love, folks. You fall in love. Why did I ask this all the time. There are people that I see together that fall in love, and I'll look at them and I'll say, "Why did she want to be with him?" You know? You look at it, you know? Or maybe you've even had the experience, if you've ever been in a relationship. You have this person that's really interested in you. Maybe the great athlete, maybe the great mind, maybe looks great. It's interested in you. And then you have this other person that you're interested in. That's really not, isn't the great athlete, doesn't have the great mind. But you want to be with that person, and you really don't care that this other person wants you. Love is a strange and funny thing. And when you're talking about God, what you're really talking about most of all is love. First letter of John, that's the only definition we have for God. God is love. So once you start talking about God, you're talking about love, and you're talking about the strangest freaking thing on the face of the earth. Because you can't figure it out. Why do ugly people like pretty people? I don't know. Nobody loved me, so I ended up... No, that's not true. You fall in love. Why did you pick your partner? Why did you have your girlfriend? It's really hard to explain. You just say, I fell in love. Well, the reason I'm a religious is because I fell in love with this person of Jesus, and he captured my imagination in such a way, I said, all I want to do is try to be more like you and follow you. And I kind of want to do whatever you want me to do. I simply fell in love. I didn't pick it. I didn't, sit there and try to calculate it out. I didn't try to figure out what would be best and what wouldn't be best. I fell in love. And so here, I'm going to finish with really how I did fall in love and how it all comes about. What you end up in life is going to depend on two things. What do you really want out of life? That's that Jesuit thing, what's your deepest desire? If you find it, folks, if you find it, it was God who put it in there. And once you go to follow it and once you go to obtain it, you'll be happy. And that's what God wants for you, to be happy. What do you really want out of life? And then to go for it. And so what you're going to be depends on that. I'm a happy Jesuit. Even in the midst of all the scandal, even in the midst of all the craziness, I'm a happy Jesuit because I found my deepest desire. I love being a companion of Jesus. I love my life, and I love serving you. Even when there are people, and I do know there are people that don't think I'm so swift, that's fine. I still want to serve you. That's what gives me joy. I sound like Father Himes. Why did I do this? Ever since I was this large, I had this fascination with God. I think it's because of all the death in my family. It used to make me so angry, death. Little Psychology 101. You meet an angry person, an angry person who tends to be violent, they're usually a scared person. I was so scared growing up because death had been all around me. I worked out a lot. I played football. I wanted to play football. I got a scholarship. I lost it because I got injured. But I wanted to play football. And I thought if I got myself strong enough, I could do anything. And all I was scared. But even then, even scared, I looked at this thing called God, and it kind of fascinated me, and it scared me. And so I met some priests and religious. I went to... We had some priests in my family, and I went to a high school run by religious called Marist. And they scared me. There was something about what they did that kind of excited me, my deepest desire. But for the most part, I thought they were crazy. I really did think they were crazy. Now I'm a religious, and I know we're all crazy. Stay away from us. We're cuckoos. But honest to God, there was something about what they were doing that excited me. And there was something about that scared me. I am one of those people that student affairs people look at and say, oh, very bad. Every school I ever went to, I never went to campus ministry. I was scared to death of it. I never went on a retreat in my life till I became a religious. I never went on one retreat. I didn't want any of that crap. I wanted the crap, but I was afraid of the crap, and I ran from the crap. And now I'm in the crap. And as I went through life, I couldn't figure out what I wanted. I lost my scholarships. I went to a very small school then. I left the school that gave me the scholarships, even though they said, you still can go here. I said, no. I went to a very small college. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I liked taking care of people. Deepest desire, deepest desire. I knew I felt like I wanted to take care of people. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. I graduated. I worked for a little while teaching, because when you don't know what you want to do, you teach. Then I really didn't know what I want to do, and if you really don't know what you want to do, you go to graduate school. Now, all the way through then, I was dating people because I was so afraid to be alone. I was so afraid to be alone. I really hated to be alone. So I kept dating people and going out with people. And I also had this fascination with God, and that kind of scared me. So every time I thought that I wanted to do something with God, I definitely called somebody up and want to go for a date. And then all of a sudden, something happened. I was dating this wonderful woman. My life really took this huge change. I was dating this wonderful woman at a local school. I was a grad assistant. And we were really very close. We'd been together for a while. And I got a call one morning, and the call said, can you go and proctor an exam for so-and-so because he's sick. I said, sure, I'll do that. I'll do that. So I went to proctor the exam. Now, even though I was still a grad assistant, I was still doing things to help people. I've always gone to soup kitchens. I've always gone to hospitals. I've always had this desire to serve. Don't know why. Just is. That's why it's so important to find out your deepest desire. But I went to do the exam this one day. And I brought the exams in. It was an 8 o'clock exam in the morning. I went in. I'm the first one there. I put the exams down. I'm getting ready. The people are coming in. And then all of a sudden, there she comes. The most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my life. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I have the picture in my room if you want to come see it. I can tell you exactly what she was wearing. She had nice fitting jeans. She had a white Oxford shirt. It was not tucked in. She had the first 3 buttons of her shirt unbuttoned. Her hair was drawn back and it was down. And I thought she was unbelievable. That day, if you were taking the exam in that classroom, you could have cheated all you wanted, because all I did for the entire class was just like this. They could have been doing everything. I'm just there like, ah. Ethics 101. I'm the grad assistant. She's a senior in college. I'm probably not allowed to do anything, right? Right. So I didn't know what to do. I took the exams. I turned them in. All I could think about was her. All I could think about was her. To the point that at the end of the semester, the woman I was dating, I just said to her one day, you know, we're not going to go anywhere. It's not fair to you. And we talked it over and we broke up. I graduated with my graduate degree. The year ended. We all graduated. I'm still feeling bad. About a month and a half later, I walk into a CVS store. I walk into a CVS store. And who's there but this woman? Everything in my body started to tingle. Oh, yes! I said, I'm not going to blow this. I went right up to her. And I couldn't speak. I'm looking at her like I'm a moron. And finally, I get it up. It just comes out. I go, you want to go out? Thanks be to God, she was a bigger loser than I am. And she said, yes. We started to date. I'm in love with her still, to this day. It was phenomenal. We dated for 4 years. I asked her to marry me. We got engaged. Our families are still wedded together. She called me by accident 45 minutes ago. I said, I think I'm going to talk about you tonight. She calls my mother more than I call my mother. I'm the godfather for her second child. But one night we were having dinner, and after dinner we cleaned up. We got on the couch, we were watching TV, we do what young people do. Next thing you know, I started to move over. She started to move over. I flumped into her, she flumped into me. Use your imagination. I'm a priest, for God's sakes, can't go too much further. And in the midst of being with her, of holding her, of enjoying each other, this picture of a man that I had been working with in the shelter earlier that day came up in my face. It was a man who was dying of AIDS that said to me, I'm afraid to die alone, Jack. Do you think you can be here with me? And all I could do is I could see his face. And while I'm making out with this woman who is the dream of my life, I'm thinking, why? And I had all sorts of thoughts. I thought, great, I'm 26 and I'm just finding out I'm gay now. That's fine. Okay, I'll deal with it. I'll deal with it. Okay. I couldn't get it out of my head. Why is this person holding my attention so much? So I do what men do. I just pretended I wasn't having anything. You know, block my mind out. But let me tell you something about a relationship. When you're in a relationship with people, they reflect back to you who you really are, if you really love them and you're vulnerable with them. And all you guys, I really hate to say this, I'm going to say one thing tonight that's going to be the most sexist thing I've ever said on this campus. Well, no, I'll say 2 sexist things tonight. But the sexist thing I'm going to say right now is men, we're screwed. Women can beat us every day of the week. And if you don't know that, you haven't been in love yet. They can beat you upside and down the other side. They know us. They know us better than we know ourselves if you really fall in love. And so I couldn't shake this thing about this guy I could see. And so what I did what all men do. We make an action plan. How am I going to get over this? How am I going to get over this? I got this great idea. We'll go on a trip. We'll go away for the weekend. And we'll have this great experience. We'll fall more passionately in love. We'll have these great experiences. I'll forget about all these freaking people in the shelter. That guy will be gone and I'll be hooked on getting married again. So we went away for the weekend. She loves the beach. I love the beach. So where do we go? The beach. Get ready for the next sexist remark. We get there. It's just about fall time. It's drizzling. Here's the sexist remark. Women have this propensity to want to walk in rain. Men do not. This is my theory. The reason women like walking in rain and men do not, we get jock rot. We don't like it. But when you're really in love, you just do whatever you're in love. And so if she wanted to walk in the rain, I'm walking in the rain. By the end of the walk, I'm walking like this, but I'm walking in the rain. But towards the end of the walk, she turns me around. She looks right in my eye. And she says to me, "You're not with me." And I do what all men do when we're caught. I act mad and I scream. "I am too!" Brilliant response, I thought. She says, "No, you're not. No, you're not." So we walk a little bit further. I scream again. "I love you!" She looks at me with a little smile and says, "I know." We walk a little bit further. "In fact, you're the only woman I really ever loved." She looks right back at me and says, "I know." We walk a little bit further and she turns around. She takes my face. I think I'm going to get a kiss out of it? Nah. She takes my face, leans right in front of me and says, "When are you going to be man enough to do what you got to do? You got to take care of people." She was right. I love her, and I love her with all my heart. And you know what? She would never be number one in my life. For some crazy reason, I love taking care of people. For some crazy reason, I love this person called Jesus Christ. For some crazy reason, when I'm with Him, life makes sense. For some crazy, stupid reason, when I'm with people in the hospital, when I'm in the prison, when I'm with you and you're crying and you're upset, I say, "You know what? This is where I belong." And we talked it over and over, and I said to her, "You know what? I love you too much to run out every time the phone calls. I love you too much not to have you number one. I think you're right." And I started to look at religious orders. A little funny story, and then we're at the end. I want to read something, then questions. The Augustinians taught me. They run Villanova. But anyway, they taught me. A little something about always trusting the Spirit of God. I went to the Augustinians and I said, "You know, I got to look at religious life. I got to look at giving up everything. I got to look up at just living a life of service for Jesus. Can I join you guys?" And they said to me, "We'd love to have you, Jack. We'd love to have you, but you know what? Before you do it, we want you to go talk to the Jesuits." And I felt crushed. I said, "I don't know any Jesuits. I don't want to go talk to the Jesuits." Well, I talked to the Jesuits, you know what? And I fell in love. Because Jesuits are just average guys to live in the world with great people like you. And some of you like us and some of you hate us, but we get to play with you. And we get to find God with each other. And we get to change the world, you and I, because God's called us to do it together. And the Jesuits were the right place for me. There are days I can't stand my church. There are days I cannot stand the leadership in my church. There are days I can't stand Jesuits. There are days I'm not too pleased with me. There are days I wish I was having great sex. Most days in life I wish I was bouncing a baby on my knee. But when it's all said and done, I would honestly tell you 95% of the time when this big old rear end goes into my bed, I'm a happy man. I fell in love with Jesus. And for me, taking vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience to say to you that God's the most important thing in my life and I'm here to serve you makes sense to me. I hate vocation talks. I hate people trying to do vocations. I would seriously doubt there are many vocations to religious life here. But as a Jesuit, I challenge you to fall in love. And whatever that thing is you fall in love with, whatever person, whatever value, whatever ideal, if it's religious life, if it's the person of Jesus Christ in a particular way, if it's your person that you met in Roncalli, if it's your next door neighbor, follow your heart. To be a religious means you fall in love with Jesus in a very particular way. You can be in love with Jesus and be married. You can be in love with Jesus and be single. For me, my life makes sense what I'm doing with poverty, chastity, and obedience. I'm a broken man. There are people in the world that are lonely. I want to be lonely with them and say I'm your friend. There are people in the world, you say, go get a date, you can't. There are people that like that. I want to be like them and be with them. I spend every Christmas in the prison. This year I'll spend in the Christmas in the prison and the orphanage, not because I'm a great guy. I don't have anywhere else to go, so why not spend it with people that don't have anybody either? Because that's where God's found. And that's where I want to be. So I'd like to end this, and then if you guys have questions for me, that's great. If you don't, I'm out the door. Here's what it means, I think, to be Ignatian. I hope we're all Ignatian, because you're going to an Ignatian school. I hope you guys find what you want in life. I did. And here's the secret. I believe. And you've heard it a lot of times. It comes from Pedro Arrupe. One more time is not going to kill you. Nothing is more practical than finding God. That is, falling in love in a quite absolute and final way. What you are in love with will seize your imagination, will affect everything. It will decide what will get you out of bed in the morning, what you do with your evenings, how you spend your weekends, what you read, who you know, what breaks your heart, what amazes you with joy and gratitude. So, fall in love, stay in love, and it will decide everything. You guys are spending $45,000 a year to come to BC. And the Jesuit mission is this: to push you and pull you to fall in love with God, with others, and yourself. To fall in love, to find your deepest desire, to go out and change the world the way God has intended it to be changed through us. My way was to be a religious poverty, chastity, obedience. Hopefully your way is going to be married and children, and I'm going to get to play with them. But together we make a family. If we find our places, it's a great family. And I'm happy as hell that I'm related to you. That's all I got. So I'll get any questions you want. Oh, there's a, if you don't agree with me, if you just hated everything I said, or if you want to challenge me, I'm really okay with it. Stand up and say, "You crazy old fool," and I'll still try to answer your question, because I kind of like doing it. Somebody's got to ask one question or she won't pay me. There's one.
How hard was it for you to make the decision to go into religious life?
Unbelievably hard.
I can't imagine.
I was scared. I was, yes! Give her my salary. I don't think I've ever cried as much as I ever did the day that I said goodbye to this person I love. And I don't think I cried as much as I ever did the second day as the day I entered the novitiate. They really thought I was a crazy fool. I'm walking in there with my bag. And they're saying, so why are you coming? Oh, I don't know why I'm coming. You know that thing I told you about obedience? I've been in love twice in my life. There's one experience that changed my life with this woman who I was engaged to, and then something very strange happened to me that I never thought would ever happen to me. Hold on to your seat, because this is a little strange. But when I was since I've been a religious, doing all my work, I came across one other woman that I said, I think I love her. Now, I didn't sleep with her. I've never had sex with her. I never touched her. I never was sexual with her. But we really not only became really good friends, I really kind of said, my God, I think I really love this person. And I went one night and I sat down in the chapel. And I said to Jesus, should I just say goodbye and never talk to her again? Because I am a religious. I take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. I really do love you more. You gave me the love of my life and that wasn't right. Should I just stop this friendship? And folks, I promise you with every bit of my being, what I heard back was Jesus said, if you do that, you will be a failure at love your whole life. Don't be a chicken. Learn how to love somebody with your vows. And I've tried to spend the last 10 years of my life learning how to love this woman and the woman that I was going to marry and my best friend Gary and my mom and my dad and you people. I really want to love you. And sometimes that's confusing and it's heart-wrenching and sometimes it's great. But Jesus said that's what your vocation is. That's what it means to be a religious. Go out and take the risk of loving people. And don't be afraid of it. And don't run from it. And so yeah. Not only was it hard to make the decision, but even now, as much as I enjoyed what I'm doing, and as much as I love doing it, sometimes, in all honesty, it's still hard. Anything else? Yes, sir. The question was, if you didn't hear it, the woman that I was in love with, who I was going to get married to, who's now married and has 2 children, do I like her husband? That's a 2-part answer. First part, the first time I met him, I thought he was the biggest creep in the world and I hated every inch of his body. Hated him. I met him and I said, inside my head, I was smiling, doing all the important, hi, my name's Jack Butler, and inside my head, you are a freaking piece of dirt, you ugly thing, you know, I'm going through that thing. She wanted me in her wedding. She didn't want me to do anything officially. She wanted me in her wedding. And I thought it would be the worst day of my life. It was the best day of my life because I knew I was where I was supposed to be. I knew where she was supposed to be. I sat at the kids' tables and the kids are jumping over me and I'm having this great old time. Now he's one of my best friends. But the first day I met him, nah. No. Just because you become a religious or just because you're a priest, you don't stop being human, folks. That's the problem. That's why we had all those scandals. We had people that had these stupid ideas of God and religion, and they pretended to do things, and then they started to act out. Being a religion, I am just as sinful as you. Probably even more so. I really do have a theory. I swear to God I have a theory that most of you people are holier than us. Most of you are smarter than us. And so God says, you guys can go out and play in the big world by yourself. For people like Jesuits and Jack Butler, he says, you stand right here next to me. I really believe that. I'm not joking. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Foolishly, I say, but no. They usually have, there's usually like a mission. I get to tell them what I want to do. And if it meets the mission criteria, then they say, yeah, go do it. But where there's needs, like for instance, at Fairfield, the director of campus ministry left, and they didn't have an opening. Well, since I do campus ministry here, and I have some of the training that I have, they said, oh, you would be good for that. And I'm thinking, no, I don't want to go to Fairfield, no, please, no. But if the provincial said to me, go, I would have gone. And it's just basically, it's discernment. Hopefully he's praying. I know I'm praying. I'm telling him what I want, and then he tells me what the Society of Jesus needs, and then I do what he tells me. No questions asked. That's how. Thanks, Boomer. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
How would you describe your formation as a person of faith?
The Jesuits, the greatest gift the Society of Jesus gave me, Jack Butler. I always loved God. I always loved Jesus. Always had this fascination. But the greatest gift the Society of Jesus gave me is they taught me how to pray. My formation in the Society of Jesus has been great. Yeah, they send you to school. I hated school. I hate God. I love God. And God's really good and all. Warpest, sickest sense of humor any being has. God. Sicko God. Yeah. Takes me, who hates school, hates school, and sends me to the Society of Jesus where I do nothing but go to school for my whole life. Sick God. Anyway, the most important thing that the Society of Jesus did for me was teach me how to pray. It wasn't the degrees they sent me to. I took the exercises, the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius of Loyola, and I got to meet God in such a personal way that it was real. That I could feel Him, that I could smell Him, that I could taste Him. It was palpable for me. So when some people say to me, at Mass, you're looking up at the sky, you're having a vision. Well, I am. I really think I see Him. I really do. I believe I see Him in the faces of people. I believe when I hear these movements inside me, it's Him. And that was the great gift the Society of Jesus gave me. This find God in everything. You don't have to go good, bad, liberal, conservative. Anybody can decide what's right and what's wrong and good and bad. The heart of the Jesuit is to find out where God's in all of it. To follow God through it all. To seek the movement of God in all of life. When it looks crazy and good, that's the gift the Society of Jesus gave me. Formation's been phenomenal. Tell you what, Miss Dawn said, stop, quarter of. Ha ha! We did it. You guys have a great, phenomenal exam. Knock them out of the park. Have a great Christmas. And so she's going to say something. Don't leave. She'll yell at me. But thanks for letting me play with you tonight.
Thank you, Jack.